The IndyCar World Series is brought to you by
Husqvarna Forest and Garden Products. Bridgestone, the science of performance. And Valvoline Motor Oil.
Surfers Paradise, Australia, the venue for round 3 of the IndyCar World Series. And we now see a tie at the top of the drivers' points. Pole position man Jimmy Vasser leads them round on the final one of their warm-up laps. And the single point that he got on Saturday afternoon in the heat of the Queensland sun ties him with compatriot Scott Pruitt, top of the drivers' table after 2 races. So Vasser, 30 years old, Reynard Honda, and 1 win under his belt for the Target team, and with a qualifying lap record, setting himself ahead of Scott Pruitt. Alessandro Zanardi, the Reynard Honda, in 3rd position, and the fastest of the Mercedes-Benz drivers, Paul Tracy, in the Penske in 4th, ahead of Michael Andretti and Christian Fittipaldi on row 3 of the grid, Parker Johnstone and Greg Moore, the young rookie, on row 4. So the weather set fair in Australia, as you would expect in the middle of the summer, and we will join our American commentary team of David Hobbs and Christopher Tate.
Jimmy Vasser, his first ever pole and Honda's first on a road course. Alongside him, Scott Pruitt, who is now the co-points leader with Vasser after 2 races. In row 2, Alessandro Zanardi, who currently leads the Rookie of the Year standings, and Paul Tracy, who has not finished a race in 1996. In row 3, it is Michael Andretti, the only time he has not been on the front row here in Australia, and Christian Fittipaldi with his best qualifying effort of 1996. In row 4, Parker Johnson, who had a crash in the morning warm-up this morning, and alongside him, the young Canadian sensation, Greg Moore, who won 10 of 12 Indy Lights races in 1995. In row 5, Andre Ribeiro won 2 weeks ago at Rio de Janeiro, and his teammate, Adrian Fernandez. In row 6, it is Mauricio Guzman. His teammate, Blundell, is here but won't race today, and Gilles de Ferran, who led Rio for a while before running out of fuel. In row 7, Bobby Rahal, who has the most starts of any active IndyCar driver, and 27-year-old Robbie Gordon. In row 8, Raul Boesel still looking for his first IndyCar win, and Alonso Jr. currently tied for 3rd in the points. In row 9, Brian Herter in his 3rd IndyCar season, and Emerson Fittipaldi, who won here in 1992. In row 10, Roberto Moreno, who raced IndyCars 10 years ago for Gallus, and Stephanie Johansson making his 60th IndyCar career start. Working our way through the rest of the grid, Carlos Guerrero and Eddie Lawson start in row 11, and in row 12, Juan Manuel Fangio and Jeff Krosnoff struggling with the Toyota engines, and on his own at the back of the grid, it is Hiro Matsushita, who is just a little bit off the pace, but is making the field once again for this IndyCar race. The cars making their way around on a couple of their pace laps. They'll bring them around. Let's take a look at this track and an interesting feature with it, Christopher.
Yes, well, in an attempt to slow down the back straight there, the Esplanade, this year the second chicane is just a little bit tighter than it was, but interestingly they seem to be lapping Guy a little more quickly than they were last year.
Well, yeah, they tried to reduce the speeds through that series of tight left-right flicks. They've introduced a new gear change, so these guys are going to be really busy now, probably 2,100 gear changes through this race. Here's a look at the point standings after 2 rounds so far. Vasser, by getting the point for getting the pole, now ties Pruitt for the lead in the championship. Unser, with a great finish in Rio, is in 3rd. Andre Ribeiro, of course, 20 points coming from his win at Rio de Janeiro. Someone we didn't see there in that top points, Robbie Gordon, who with a good finish at Rio could be way ahead in the championship, but had that off towards the end of the race.
Yep, that was an extraordinary feature of the closing laps at Rio.
Another interesting feature, Christopher, about this track, you talk about, it's one of the only ones where they go left.
Yes, very unusual to have one turning left so quickly, and here we have Vasser leading the cars round to his first ever pole.
59 career starts in IndyCar, 5 times he's been on the front row, but this is his first pole. Congratulations to him, great effort. The Honda Firestone Reynard combination proving to be the one to have in 1996, although Scott Pruitt right behind him also on the Firestones, but with the Ford motor is proving to be very, very strong too. They're saying not so much horsepower for the Ford, but the fact that they've set up the car so well on this track is what's making Pruitt quick, and also Michael Andretti. So the Ford have actually sort of come out and said, listen, we just don't have the horsepower horsepower the Honda does. Honda's been very, very quick. The question is, can Firestones win on a street course? They've won all the ovals going back to Michigan in IndyCar racing and, of course, the IRL racing as well. So Firestone having a great year. As they come around, pace cars should be peeling off. We should be getting a green flag this time by, Christopher.
It looks as though they're going to form up. Oh, Vasser's jumped a little bit. Maybe they're not going to let them go this time.
I don't think we're going to get a green flag with that because Vasser had a huge jump. No, we're going to get a yellow flag. So for the third consecutive IndyCar race, we have a yellow flag start. We didn't have much luck getting started in Miami, not much luck getting started in Rio, and now Vasser, first time on the pole, up to him to bring the field around, but it looked like he made a bit of a jump. Just going back to that point we made about the track, Christopher, it's one of the only street courses where they make so many left-hand turns.
Yes, rather ironic really, because everybody always thinks of left-hand turns being a feature of the oval tracks. This is a very rare occurrence. This Surfers Paradise circuit is mostly left-handed turns, and that's the way it runs. The point there about Vasser is that it is the first time. It's always a little tense, and we've seen this before for all the new pole sitters. They get a little overexcited, and I think Jimmy just jumped out there.
There we just saw Guzman go past in the picture. Just to update you, Blundell has come to the track but is not racing. Here's some of the results over the last 5 years here. The only man to win from pole, Nigel Mansell, back in 1993. But some unusual winners' names in here. I say unusual because John Andretti, obviously an upset victory in the Hall in the first race. Fittipaldi was not expected to win in 1992. Mansell wins his first ever IndyCar race. Michael Andretti comes back from Formula One and wins the first race for him and Reynard.
The first race for Reynard, indeed.
And last year, Paul Tracy wins a race, but in his racing debut for the Newman-Haas team. Now, of course, he's back with the Penske team, taking some of that Newman-Haas information back with him. He has been the quicker of the two drivers for Penske, definitely this year, quicker than Al Unser Jr. He's been going pretty good, not so for Al Unser Jr. As you can see, sun beating down on the track. They've had a few support races. There should be some rubber down. There should be a good track surface, good racing temperatures. Always a good race here in Australia, apart from the long rain delay we had a couple of years ago that caused it to go running late, and then in fact that race was shortened, the one that Michael Andretti won, because it was getting so dark. Here's Vasser and Pruitt. We work our way through the field. The rookies, Alessandro Zanardi, as we mentioned, now leading that after a great finish at Rio. Greg Moore's had two great runs, picked up very few points, so that comes from a 7th place finish at Miami, although he made that whole lap back and could well have gone on to win that race. Greg Moore's proving to be a sensation in IndyCar racing.
And not just Greg Moore and Zanardi there with the points. It's worth saying that there were 9 drivers here last year with the IndyCars who are not here this year, and we've got 8 new to this circuit drivers out there. Been very impressed by Zanardi's performance as well. That's another excellent qualifying performance, don't you think?
Well, he performed very well at Rio on an oval, and he said he didn't expect, of course, that to happen on an oval. He would expect it to come from somewhere like here on a tight street course where he's used to running in Formula One and the other forms of racing, and I am expecting to see a great result from Zanardi here. And as we've seen some upset winners here previously, I think he may well be an upset winner here at Australia.
Well, this circuit,
because he's so new to the series.
Exactly. I mean, this circuit always known for producing a surprise, and it looks as though Jimmy's learnt his lesson and could well come down to the line in good order here.
The car's nice and tight and closed up. Vasser starts to make a run. They'll get a green flag this time. Pruitt goes with him. Along comes Zanardi, and Paul Tracy will fit in right behind as they race down, and they're going to go right through the gears. On there you see Tracy making a great move past Zanardi to pick up the 3rd spot. Through the left-hander. This is where we've seen lots of problems in the past. Right in the curbs. Johnston getting very high.
All very tight there, and I think that was Al Unser there being squeezed out on the, but he just seems to have ridden up over the curbs. Well, yeah, he's fine. He's running without too much problem, and they're all there through and down through the back of the field. As we were saying earlier, another difficult qualifying for the Toyota engine cars.
25 cars taking the green flag down in Australia as we get ready for 65 laps or 295 kilometers around this beautiful 4.54 kilometer track, 12 turns on a temporary circuit. Lots of braking points, lots of downshift points. We're going to see lots of overtaking here in Australia today. As now, along comes Jimmy Vasser to lead the field with Scott Pruitt right behind him. These two lead the championship as we speak. Looks like they're going to be able to pull a little bit away from Paul Tracy. Zanardi right behind them, and then Michael Andretti rounding out the top 5.
I think Zanardi will be cross with himself there, don't you, Guy? That was strange. He gave quite a lot of room there, which Paul Tracy very gratefully said thank you, and away he came.
It looked like he may have missed a shift or something on the straightaway because Tracy just zoomed right by him. The Canadian, of course, he won this
grand engine through the 2 days of qualifying here. The Ford engine, as Guy was saying earlier, has worked very nicely for him, and look, he's neatly tucked there underneath Vassar's rear wing and be looking for his opportunity in due course. We've had a nice steady opening lap, we think, so far. No sign of any incident further down the field.
Jimmy Vassar, the 30-year-old, leans over Scott Pruitt, just turned 32. Pruitt in that Firestone sponsored car. Basically, he's the factory Firestone ride as they chase down each other. So it's a Firestone Honda Reynard leading a Firestone Lola Ford, and then right behind them, Paul Tracy in a Penske Mercedes Goodyear car. 8 different combinations at Miami took the 8 top positions. So we see lots of great racing amongst chassis manufacturers and engine manufacturers and tire manufacturers, really spicing it up in the IndyCar series this year.
It really has been a nice level opening with all sorts of people. The Honda obviously coming out strongest of all so far, but the mix of chassis, engine and tires has looked really competitive, and we're expecting this whole season when we come back to the circus here in the United States to be just perfect.
Firestone, we know, have proven themselves on the oval tracks, but have they proven themselves on the road courses? Well, Honda's got its first pole for them, and now Firestone, by going on the pole here on the road course, is proving to be very good, and I think they're going to be working just fine. The story, of course, Bridgestone now, a part of Firestone, or owner of Firestone, going to Formula One in 1997.
Yes, and they've announced their intention of doing so, and there's a new Japanese Formula One team being formed just for that purpose, the Dome team that's been so successful in Japanese Formula 3000, where Jeff Krosnoff, of course, has got a great deal of experience. Krosnoff having had another difficult practice in the Toyota-powered Reynard, and he was, in fact, for the first time out-qualified by Juan Fangio in the Eagle Toyota.
An interesting thing happening this year in the schedule with Formula One and IndyCar. They flip-flopped, of course. IndyCar have come from Brazil to go to Australia. Formula One has gone from Australia to go to Brazil. And an interesting rumour coming up in the Australian papers this year about the possibility of this race moving to May for next year.
Yes, it now seems that with the Australian Formula One Grand Prix moving back to the beginning of the season instead of its traditional slot right at the end of the year, it seems that in order to avoid putting Australia's 2 big international events too close to each other, that may well be the case for next year.
Of course, that's all going to come out as far as the Indy 500 and US 500 May. Of course, a very busy time of the year for these IndyCar drivers normally. Vassar leads over Pruitt. Paul Tracy is 3rd. Alessandro Zanardi is 4th. Michael Andretti is in 5th. And then it's Christian Fittipaldi, Parker Johnston, Greg Moore, Aiden Fernandez, and rounding out the top 10, Andre Ribeiro, who is about 10 seconds behind our leader. We have completed 3 of 65 laps. The 2 lead cars seem to be getting themselves a bit of a cushion over Tracy.
And what's interesting is also who it is who's just outside the top 10. We've got Gordon, De Ferran, Rahal and Al Jr. And that's a strong selection of people to be outside the top 10. So there's plenty of action to come.
Rahal always in there, of course. We look now at the replay, pardon me, Vassar, and what he's done coming over these, clipping these curves. We believe he's picked up a cone, and there it is. You can see it just right on top of the rollover bar. That may either go away, hopefully for him. If he gets up and tries to throw it away, he may get in trouble for that, causing a problem for Pruitt. They'll be radioing and telling him it's there. It's not going to be affecting him at this point.
And he's got to hope that it's not going to be blocking his air intakes and affecting his cooling in any way.
It shouldn't be not where it's positioned right there, because right behind there we have the pop-off valve. But that cone, we've seen cones picked up here in Australia many, many times before. And Nigel Mansell, in fact, picked up a hat a couple of years ago and sat on his wing. And don't forget, Greg Moore started the Miami race. They left the wing covers on, and until Robbie Gordon radioed in and said, here we see a great on-car picture from Vassar's car. You see the cone. I think it's going to work its way off.
It's either going to work its way off or it's going to work the camera off, which would be a pity.
Camera would be very expensive. We've got that one in-car camera. We've also got in-car cameras from Rahal, Michael Andretti, Christian Fittipaldi, Stephanie Johansson, and Andre Ribeiro today. So I'll have plenty of in-car coverage for you. It seems, no, the cone is still in there, but it's not hindering Vassar at this point as he leads over Pruitt. Paul Tracy in 3rd, Alessandro Zanardi in 4th, and Michael Andretti in 5th position.
I've got to say that Vassar looks a little bit twitchy up there, Guy. I don't know about you, but I see him pushing it quite hard here. You can see him twitching away under braking as he comes into those chicanes. He's obviously determined to build himself a bit of a lead, a bit of a tail end slide there, as we saw. The surface is reasonably bumpy here, as is always the case with street courses, though they've recently put down a nice new surface, but the actual underlying core is, as you can see, throwing the drivers around a little bit. And Vassar is obviously determined to try and pull out a bit of a lead here.
Vassar having a great run at this point. He was voted the most improved driver of 1995 by his fellow drivers, so obviously a great reward for him to pick that up. He's come up through the ranks of American racing, mainly a big star in what is now the Toyota Atlantic Series, the Formula Atlantic. Won the West Coast Championship a couple of times, and now is proving very, very strong in the IndyCar Series. 30-year-old Jimmy Vassar leading over Scott Pruitt right now. It's a 65-lap race. We're in lap 5 right now. Our estimate is fuel window somewhere around about the 22-lap mark. Should see our first pit stops coming up. The two leaders, though, Pruitt and Vassar, have left from Tracy. Zanardi's in 4th. Michael Andretti is in 5th. And in 6th position, it's Christian Fittipaldi. We'll be back after this.
Back to the Indycar World Series with
Husqvarna Forest and Garden Products.
Back live in the beautiful Gold Coast of Australia. Surfers Paradise, round 3 of the IndyCar Series. And here's a look at the leaderboard, the top 10 for you. Vassar, 30-year-old, leads over Scott Pruitt. Then Paul Tracy, the Canadian, in 3rd. Alessandro Zanardi out of Italy is 4th. Michael Andretti currently running in 5th position. Christian Fittipaldi, a representative of Brazil, is 6th. Greg Moore, a Canadian, 7th. The Mexican, Adrian Fernandez, is 8th. The Brazilian, Gil de Ferran, is 9th. Gil de Ferran, the only guy to have led both races so far this year. Robbie Gordon is 10th. The yellow flags are out for this man, Parker Johnston, who had a fairly major stop, making contact with the tyre wall. He is out of the car and okay. A disappointing run for him because he's got one of the most competitive packages, the Honda Firestone Reynard, which Vassar and Zanardi are the only other ones running. He also crashed this morning in the warm-up. In fact, we can show you the crash from this morning in the warm-up for Parker Johnston. Just a disappointing run for them. Here it is this morning in the morning warm-up before the race. Parker Johnston, and same thing, just looked like he didn't have any turn-in power there at all. So he is out. That's the reason for this yellow flag on lap number 12 of 65. Christopher, just to go back for 1 second, we talked about Carl Haas, a very charismatic man, is losing the Lola franchise that he's had since 1967. He's very upset about that, obviously, and there's a possibility he's going to keep it through this year. It'll lose it in 97. There's talk of courts and lawsuits all coming into play, but Carl Haas, not being a fool, has backed himself up and said, well, I'll distribute Swift, maybe make an IndyCar Swift chassis, which is owned by Hiro Matsushita. Dallara may possibly be coming into IndyCar Series, which we mentioned. Evans and Fittipaldi possibly running in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but it clashes and he is out of this race. And we'll be back to cover those points and more for you from Indy in just a few moments. Vasser has picked up a point for starting from the pole. He may pick up a point for leading the most laps. It looks like we're going to get a green flag this time by as the lights are out on the Porsche pace car here in Australia. Not often seeing a Porsche pace car. Quick update for you. Andre Ribeiro, who started 9th, has fallen way down the field at this point. Must have some kind of problem wrong with his Honda.
I think that was when he had either a little off, or I think in trying to avoid the Johnston incident, he actually stalled and the marshals had to push start him again.
You're right, then he dropped back in there. We talked about Lola as we get back to go green flag racing. Still that cone hooked up in that the rollover bar of Jimmy Vasser's car. Pruitt stays right on his tail. And in third it is Tracy, Zanardi, Michael Andretti, Christian Fittipaldi, Greg Moore, who's having a good run once again, the Canadian. Greg Moore pointed out the great thing about him coming from Indy Lights to IndyCar. Because of the IndyCar package change this year, they reduced downforce by about 35%. It's a lot like driving an Indy Lights car for him. Obviously a bit more horsepower.
And he feels very comfortable. The 20-year-old young Canadian has really just done a tremendous job in his first 3 races. And indeed last year in the Indy Lights series, he was dominant on all the street circuits. Tremendous performance. And he feels very comfortable in this lower downforce IndyCar.
Poor Tracy let the back end get way out on the day. You see how much they jump these curbs here in Australia. We've talked about it a lot. We'll talk about kangaroos in Australia and they're kangaroo hopping over these curbs. Not so much that one, but the other combinations. And in fact, a couple of years ago, we saw Michael Andretti just drive straight across all of them. We just mentioned, just to finish up that story one more time, Chris, with the Lolas we talked about, it was a very busy year for them.
Yes, and the chance now perhaps for 97 to see 2 new chassis in IndyCar. Then if Haas does bring the Swift in, of course Lola also in for a very busy year next year with a new chassis for Indy Lights, and Dallara possibly, as we were just saying earlier, coming across from Italy. So as with the new Eagle chassis this year, IndyCar racing just getting bigger, broader and better all the time. More and more new chassis, new engine combinations and so on.
It's the Canadian Paul Tracy, who has led most laps of anybody this year, 83, but only has points for pole and leading laps. As we ride with him there, the Canadian. And now we get the view at the back of Jimmy Vasser's car. Back to Scott Pruitt. Scott Pruitt has completed the most laps, 266, and the most miles. He's been running at the finish of two races. That's why he is leading the points championship with Jimmy Vasser right now. We should be seeing some pit stops.
And I'm not sure that Tracy didn't just clip the wall then. Yes, what you were saying about Pruitt's fascinating. I mean, the man has become Mr. Consistency. He's looking to take over Bobby Rahal's mantle in that title in IndyCar. And it would appear from one of the reports around the circuit that Gilles has had a problem, and that looks like no repetition of the famous Hall victory here at the first ever Surfers Paradise.
Gilles Dufresne, who is running 9th, as we now ride on board with Michael Andretti trying to get, we haven't had a repeat winner here. In fact, only 3 drivers in the field today have competed in all these IndyCar races. Here it is, we see Gilles Dufresne, and also is that
tangled with, I think he's tangled with Fernandez. Indeed he has. They were running together in 8th and 9th, and it looked as though Gilles and Adrian got together. That'll be a big disappointment down in South America. Both those men have enormous followings in Brazil and Mexico, respectively.
Michael Andretti, who crashed on the last lap of last year, now chases down Paul Tracy. They are about 2 seconds behind our leader, Jimmy Vasser. Scott Pruitt in second. And we just saw Gilles Dufresne going out with contact with Adrian Fernandez. Fernandez not having a good year so far this year. He has been running at the end of 2 races, but his top finish was an 11th. And here we see a replay now of, it looks like Fittipaldi trying to make a move down the inside there, and this is where we see Fernandez and Dufresne locking up together.
And that just looks as though Adrian slightly surprised Gilles by braking a little early. Robbie Gordon just manages to get through. I can't believe that will have done Adrian any good, and he's looking.
Michael Andretti again, once riding on board with him once again. You see that Caltex, that's actually an Australian version of Texaco, and that's why they run that Australian Caltex sticker there just below. Gilles Dufresne looks like he was probably just a little bit of wing damage, or maybe just to the nose there. You can see the tire mark on the nose, but he is able to get running out and get out again and try and get some points in this 3rd round of the championship, as he is doing certainly very well currently in the championship.
He was very disappointed though, was he not, with his the run in Rio, where through no fault of his own there was a very strange miscalculation on the fuel, and poor old Gilles ran out of fuel when he was leading the race.
Well, he should have won, of course, there. He ran out of fuel, a bad calculation by, surprisingly, the Jim Hall team. He's the only guy to have led both races so far. And that accident we saw all happen as a result of Christian Fittipaldi trying to knit down the inside of Alessandro Zanardi just ahead of him too.
So we've seen one or two surprises already. Parker Johnson went out, and we thought it looked, Guy, didn't we, as though Parker was having trouble with the understeer there. Both his morning warm-up practice accident and indeed his accident this afternoon were both started by an inability to turn in sharp enough to the left-hand corners there, and that may have been a problem with either the front wing or a problem with the grip, but that's Parker out early, having missed already the Miami race, so he's going to have to play catch-up for the rest of the season. I think that's a case of, in this case, not enough front wing, probably. And it's got to be so disappointing for him to know that he is the only guy to have the same package as Vassar and Zanardi, and they've been quickest everywhere we've been. Here you see a local yellow, that's for Adrian Fernandez's car, which is still off to the side, not a full course yellow. So it's got to be incredibly irritating for Johnston to know that he's got the power, the chassis and the tyres to be winning these races, and yet crash at Miami in the not even qualified, not even in a race. A disappointing run in Rio, and now out again here in Australia. It's a long way to come to do about 4 or 5 laps. A little disheartening for the Bricks Comtech team, which is the merged result of bringing together the Bricks IMSA team with last year's Comtech team, for which Parker ran so effectively. And he's a greatly underrated driver, wouldn't you say? One of the younger Americans who's really going to win a lot.
He should.
Oh, and Michael, that was never going to work. That was never going to work. And
furious.
That is one blocked track.
We're going to get a yellow there. You see Christian Fittipaldi and Alessandro Zanardi making their way through. Michelangelo and Rahal all the way down through to 12th position right now.
Guy, we've got
Christian
to say, Christian stalled it, and everybody stalled it, and the track is now
trying to get a bump start from Rahal, and it's worked.
Got a bump start from
There's
Rahal.
some great teamwork there.
What a mess. Michael, I cannot sometimes think why you are so impatient. That was never on, that move.
That's the first time we've seen that man, Raul Bosel. Look how far back he is in that great car, in 12th position. That's a great car, great team. Let's
So
take
here
a
we
look
go.
at the replay. Michael Andretti, take a look down the inside.
And I'm afraid it just looks as though he went for a gap that wasn't going to be there the moment that Tracy turned. It has to be said that Tracy was risking it. If you see Michael doing that on the inside of you, that's not the smartest move to try and chop him, and I'm afraid that's going to be that for the Penske. Yes, definitely, the wing's gone and everything's gone. Once again, it looks as though Michael has come off best in an accident which at least we've got to say he may well have started.
Damage to the rear wing, damage to the front wing.
And a little bit of worry that there could be some oil there on the course. But you see, Michael, we saw him locking up that same wheel earlier on in the race. And look, the moment he stopped his cadence braking, bang.
Back to the IndyCar series, live with Bridgestone, the science of performance.
So as we rejoin the action in Surfers Paradise, Paul Tracy, the victim of an ambitious overtaking manoeuvre by Michael Andretti, and Tracy is out of the race. He waited by the car for Michael to come by, just to give him that universal gesture of friendship that Formula One viewers would recognize from Heinz-Harald Frentzen in Adelaide. So Maurizio Gugelmin has just crashed out, but Paul Tracy's still in the race as we rejoin our American team.
Out by Al Unser Jr. Al Unser Jr. worked his way up into 3rd spot. Had a great run at Rio. That's why he's in 3rd in the championship right now. And we talked about Roger Penske, his team owner. Some big news for him. Christopher will let you share that with us.
Yes, indeed. Earlier this week, to the delight of the New York and international financial community, Penske's International Motor Speedways operation was officially floated with enormous excitement. The shares were 20 times oversubscribed and immediately moved to a very strong premium. So Penske successful on the track, successful of course in his $5 billion turnover business, which covers every form of transportation from Detroit diesel through to a massive truck leasing operation in the United States. Has had a very successful debut for its Motor Speedways operation on the New York Stock Exchange, including the new Montana Speedway, which of course is very much part of that, and that's being built out in California and will be expecting to be holding an IndyCar race very shortly.
It's already been awarded a NASCAR race, which as far as North American racing is concerned is the bee's knees, so he's going to be very happy with that. And obviously that stock just responding extremely well on the stock market. They went out originally, I believe, at about $7 or $8, and it went straight up to $34. I knew I should have had an inside line on that one. Unfortunately,
no one's ever lost money following what Roger Penske does.
No, that's true. And Alonso Jr. Certainly found an inside line with the Roger Penske team. He is a two-time IndyCar World Champion, currently running in third, ahead of Alessandro Zanardi right now, and then Greg Moore in fifth, in number 99, the Canadian sensation, having a great run this year.
It's worth stressing, really, what a great job Greg Moore has done. The first day practice, he was only 19th fastest guy, and he and his team went away and had a little think about it. Moore said there was more in it for him, that he could try a little harder. They tweaked the chassis a little bit, and he came straight out, and there we see him running just behind Alex Zanardi and looking very strong. He's up to fifth, and he's only about 13 seconds back from the leader.
We'll pick up Greg Moore, the Canadian, a 20-year-old. Had a great run going at Miami, a superb run going at Rio. Some problems for them there. And now, though, he has driven his way up into fifth position. He's only 20 years old. He's come from the Indy Light Series, where he won 10 of 12 races last year. He was actually under contract, though, to the Forsyth team. And now we see Juan Manuel Fangio, I believe, back in the pits with that Castrol sponsorship. As I mentioned, the director of Castrol said the reason we've gone on, even though we know that they're a development team, development car, is their involvement with the World Rally Championship, and Castrol is huge in Asia, and the big thing for them was the fact that the international coverage that the IndyCar gets.
And of course that deal brokered by Mr. Sponsorship himself and the author of the most fascinating book on motor racing sponsorship, the Briton Guy Edwards.
Doesn't help me get a penny.
Read it again, Guy. Read the book again.
Oh, I only read the front cover. Jimmy Vasser continues to lead over Scott Pruitt, Alonso Jr. third, Alessandro Zanardi is fourth. Just to go through the international field for you, Gilles de Ferran is in seventh, Stefan Johansson in 10th, Ralph Boesel is in 12th, struggling again, Carlos Guerrero in 13th, Roberto Moreno is in 16th, Andre Ribeiro in 17th, Hiro Matsushita in 18th, Mauricio Guzman 1 lap down in 19th, as is Emerson Fittipaldi. Just to run down the top 20 for you here. Of course, Paul Tracy out, Parker Johnston is also out, and Adrian Fernandez also out. We understand Fernandez may have actually hurt his wrist in that accident.
Yes, that looked as though what happened there was that when he got tapped from behind, the steering wheel flicked round, and that can often happen. Happened famously many years ago when Jackie Stewart had to miss great chunks of a Formula One season with a wrist in plaster for exactly that reason, sort of whiplash back from the steering wheel. And it looks like Adrian's got that trouble now. Vasser continuing, and it looks as though he's pulling away a little bit from Pro.
He's certainly cushioning his gap to about 2.89 seconds right now over Pruitt. Pruitt probably hoping for pit stops to come up, a yellow, maybe make some adjustments to his car. You mentioned Jackie Stewart, another very famous ex-Formula One driver here this weekend, of course, Sir Jack Brabham.
Yes, wonderful to see him here in Queensland, and Sir Jack has been demonstrating his famous 1961 Indianapolis 500 Cooper Climax.
This one he raced, of course, 35 years ago at Indianapolis, and he did some demonstration laps. I came over on the 747s with the rest of these cars, which
from
will
the
actually...
museum at Indianapolis, and of course that was the car that set the whole small, low, light rear engine trend, later picked up so effectively by Colin Chapman, which is what started the British-built rear-ended revolution, which is what we still see carried through here in today's Indy cars, with all but the AAR Toyota Eagle being built in Britain, the Penskes, the Lolas, and the Reynards.
There's great business for them. Michael Andretti was involved in an accident with Paul Tracy earlier. We saw what Paul Tracy thought of it. Let's find out now what he has to say about his crash with Michael.
Paul Tracy has made his way down to the garage area. Now, Paul, we had a look at it from the onboard of Michael's. How did it unfold from your perspective?
Well, at first, the Marlboro car was running great. We made a good start. I was pacing myself, saving the brakes, getting good fuel mileage, and Michael's just textbook, isn't it? I mean, he just comes along and locks up and hits you from behind and spins you around. And you know, it's disappointing for the team, but it's got to stop. You know, it just has to stop.
Well, we hope for better fortune at Long Beach, but I know you're very concerned about the lack of points so far.
I am. It's disappointing for the team, but hopefully we do well at Long Beach. Thanks.
And that was really very interesting. Paul looked as though a little towel and a glass of cold water might have cooled him down. He was being quite diplomatic there. Here we see Michael.
I don't think he was being very diplomatic when he said it's a textbook manoeuvre by Mike.
Textbook manoeuvre. What I mean was he was talking about the disappointment from the team and so on. Paul is also noted for a fairly quick temper. Interesting to see that he appears to have lost the little Rasputin type beard guy, which I think we're probably happy to see.
Yeah, the goatee he was wearing there, and that was for him, and he said it was to make him feel like a little tougher and act a little tougher out on the track. And of course, Paul Tracy and Michael Andretti, I mean, last year we had a case of one complaint about the other one, and they both lodged complaints. It turned out that had 12 complaints each lodged by other drivers against them. So they're both known for touching and getting together. But I think Paul Tracy makes a very good point. It's a textbook maneuver by Michael Andretti. We've seen it happen before, and of course it's always a case where Michael Andretti is able to carry on racing. The guy he makes contact with goes out.
It certainly seemed that way this time, and there are a number of people, including famously poor Al Jr. at Elkhart last year, who would like to have a similar word with Michael. So let's see how this develops, but at the moment he's fallen back, of course, as a result of his stop and go, down to 11th place now, but he's still looking hot and he's still looking strong. And did you see him there carving his way back up through the field, come up behind Stefan Johansson, who's got Brian Herter in front of him, and that may slow his progress a little bit, but he came carving back through from where he was.
You previously mentioned Stefan Johansson, disappointing year because he switched. They used to run a year-old Penske chassis. Well, this year they've gone to Reynard, they got the Mercedes. Oh, Michael locking him up again. As he tries to make a move on Johansson, we'll see if he was able to do it. But Johansson just not running anything like as strong as he should be. He's raced Formula One, of course, for the McLaren team, and the Ferrari team, and just not performing as well as I think everyone would expect for him. And the Alamax company, they've spent more money, new paint scheme this year, huge new shop for the Tony Bettenhausen team. Their budget obviously not as big as a lot of the other teams, but just a disappointment for the Swede Stefan Johansson, as we now right on board once again with Michael Andretti, talking of the Swede Stefan Johansson. 15 international drivers representing 7 countries here this weekend. We've also got 10 cars on Firestone, 15 cars on Goodyear. We've got 3 Penske chassis, 1 Eagle, 12 Reynards, 9 Lolas, which is what we're riding on board with Michael Andretti right now, 6 Hondas, 9 Ford engines, 8 Mercedes, and 2 Toyota. What a great diversity of chassis, manufacturers, tires, and countries. And of course, that all leads to the new championships. We have a manufacturers championship, a constructors championship, and a Nations Cup. As we look again once more at Michael trying to get by Johansson.
And this is a classic Michael maneuver. You see the helmet tucking down determinedly inside, and he's all locked up and only just manages to get that round. What the American engineers called push, but known worldwide as understeer there. And Michael really very lucky just to squeeze by Stefan Johansson without any.
Johansson's staying right with him actually too.
Yes, he certainly is. What you were just saying about the Bettenhausen Motorsports team there with the backing from Alimax is that Stefan may well be in his last season, so the rumour goes. He's no one's saying he's not still competitive and keen, but this is a small team, relatively underfinanced compared to some others, but nevertheless, with a state-of-the-art chassis, we would have expected to see him consistently a little higher. It's not been kind to him so far. Interestingly, also, we just have to comment here, Guy, that as Michael was going round, and indeed as he came in to do his stop and go, you could hear the crowd quite vociferously giving him the bird there.
Yeah, they're not very happy with that result. They get together with Paul Tracy. Scott Pruitt now dropped back as we follow him to about 5 seconds behind our leader, Jimmy Vasser, who has led 30 of the 65 laps. A couple more laps and he will pick up a bonus point for leading the most laps. And there's Pruitt second, Hudson Jr. third, Zanardi is fourth still, Greg Moore in fifth, Bobby Ray Hall in sixth, Mr. Consistency in seventh, and Gilbert Ferran after the spin with Fernandez and almost getting involved in another incident with Mauricio Guzman. He's managed to stay out there in seventh, a good run for him. Gordon has now worked his way up to eighth, Brian Herter now in ninth, and Michael have reports that Zanardi is slowing down.
Yes, as we said, Christian here has held his position. I mean, yes, he's now a lap behind, but he's not lost any ground to Al, who's been chasing him through there. And Christian's had a good weekend demonstrating speed, consistency, and a sensible approach. And as we were saying earlier, his performance in Rio was really something of a revelation. Now, it looks as though Zanardi is dropping back, and
There you see him going down
he is down a very dusty.
Well, those are escape routes that they've put those in this year.
Yes, indeed.
They've added those this year so that we don't have to have long, lengthy yellows for pile-ups at the chicane. And if you need to, you can pull off and use those. And Zanardi's obviously using those, so he's going to. He's not watching his mirrors too carefully.
He was worrying about what was wrong with the car there and not paying a great deal of attention to what was going on in his mirror. Poor Alex Zanardi. Obviously, that's some kind of mechanical problem, and we're just trying to find out exactly what that problem is. But he has really made a tremendous IndyCar debut over these last 3 races, and he's looked very competitive today. But there you see, both from the body language and what he's doing with the visor, he's got a puncher. He's got the one side of the car appeared to be all
Michael Andretti back in the pits as well, and this is certainly unscheduled pit stop. We see a PPG IndyCar official there. I don't know if he's been pulled in. No, looks like they're going to be taking off the rear bodywork of the car.
The computer's being plugged in there.
Yeah.
Yep, there's clearly a problem, and I doubt whether many people in the Paul Tracy pit will be weeping tears there to see that happen. Zanardi is now coming in, and
I don't
he
see a problem. Maybe
still under power.
Maybe a transmission problem. That seems to be a problem here previously as we've raced in Australia. But both Alessandro Zanardi and Michael Andretti,
and we're getting confirmation, Guy, that proves your exactly accurate prediction that is indeed a gearbox problem there for Zanardi. That's what he radioed in with, and immediately the engineers are swarming all over the back of the car. But it doesn't look as though Alex intends to do very much more today. So that's off for early shower and a chance to look at Queensland's beautiful beaches.
Early shower, but no early flight, unfortunately. Of course, the next race for these guys will be Long Beach coming up in just a couple of weeks as we go to another street course, very similar to this one, but the cars, of course, are going to be flown back from Australia. 2 747s are hired to bring all these cars back. Not as many went as we expected, and hopefully, we've talked about at the beginning of the show, Mark Blundell is here at the race in a plaster, watching, supporting Mauricio Gugelmin, but is not racing. His car didn't go. His car went back to England to be looked at, but hopefully we're going to have a word with Mark Blundell later on in the show. Pruitt, who we're understanding is slowing down, but he's basically turned the boost down just a little bit, or down the leanness down a bit, trying to save fuel possibly, as he's going to wait to try and get to the next yellow flag before making his pit stop. 32 laps to complete, fastest lap of the race so far by our leader, Jimmy Vasser, at 102.8 miles per hour. We also have reports that Jimmy Vasser's having communication problems with his crew. So whether he's going to find out about Zanardi's transmission or not is going to be determined through that. So as we get about halfway through this race, Christopher, problems cropping up for Pruitt, Vasser, now Zanardi, and Michael Andretti also in the pit. Greg Moore coming up to 4th position.
Yes, Moore looking very strong, but it has to be said, it's always been a tough course. A tough course on gearboxes, the walls are very hard and very close, and with 30% less downforce this year, a lot of people are discovering how easy it is to tap that wall. And talking about tapping walls, Mark Blundell, you were just mentioning, yes, he has been here in order to cheer on Mauricio Gugelmin. Not that, unfortunately, that's done the team a great deal of good, because Mauricio, of course, is now out. But Mark has now been able to tell us a little bit more about what happened there in Rio.
Well, I know you spoke to a good... Oh, Bobby Rahal with troubles too, as he slows down on course. This could bring out a full course yellow if he's nowhere near the pits.
That's side pod damage there, is it? Can we see?
Just going back, he's made it into the pits safely.
Yep.
Anyway, just going back, I know you spoke to a good friend of ours, old Pell boy, Perry McCarthy back in England, a good friend of Mark Blundell's.
Perry McCarthy and Mark Blundell.
The greatest piano players I've seen, by the way. Here's a replay, we'll get on that story in just a second, a replay of Rahal locking up the left front. We've seen this happen to Johansson, we've seen it happen to Johnston, we've seen it happen to Gugelmin. From there, we don't see what happens, but looking like it could be fairly early terminal as the back end of that car is coming off. Now, we've seen, this is a Reynard we've seen with problems. Zanardi was a Reynard with problems. If you remember last year, Reynard had trouble with transmission problems. Rahal's out of the car, so his day is done. We'll try and get a report as to what his problem. This is, of course, totally changing the top 10, so I'll run down it very quickly for you. Vassar leads by about 7 seconds over Pruitt, then Al Unser Jr., Greg Moore, Gilles de Ferran in 5th, Robbie Gordon in 6th, Brian Herter in 7th, Stephanie Hansen now in 8th, Raul Boesel works his way up to 9th, and get this, Carlos Guerrero is in 10th.
To be fair, Carlos Guerrero, having a reputation as something of a backmarker on the street circuits, has been running very strongly for him all day today, and good for him up there in the top 10 in the Herdez-sponsored Mexican-backed Dick Simon run car. And Greg Moore continues to impress. Now he's up in 4th place. He's only about 25 seconds down on the leader. It would only take a yellow for that to really, of course, narrow right down, and for Greg to be back in there with a chance. We were talking about Mark Blundell earlier, just before that latest little round of excitements with Bobby Rahal. And yes, indeed, we're talking with Perry McCarthy the other day, great friend of Mark Blundell's, of course, and great racer with him in many of the championships up through the international ladder over many years in the late 80s and early 90s. Perry said that Mark really was quite perturbed by that big smack into the wall. It was a brake failure. The team has accepted complete responsibility and put out really very brave. You have to admire them, Guy, for the statement they put out to admit brake failure completely. Mark actually hit the wall of what the telemetry showed to be 199 miles an hour. And a lot of people here already we're now seeing out of the race. That's Paul Tracy, Adrian Fernandez, as we saw, and Zanardi and Rahal are the two most recent dropouts.
We don't know exactly why Rahal dropped out, but we'll try and get an update for you on that. And just to finish up that story, Perry McCarthy, good news for him, he signed a deal to do some racing.
Terrific news for him. Perry has got the #1 seat alongside Jan Lammers in the works Lotus, the new Lotus with the V8 engine, the Lotus designed in-house V8 engine in the very, very competitive GT1 series, including Le Mans and all the other famous races along there with the McLarens and the Ferraris, and that's going to be very good for Perry after his very difficult Formula 1 spell with the Andrea motor cars.
Great news for him. Great news for Jimmy Vasser as he continues to lead. He's now led 35 laps. This will give him a bonus point for leading the most laps today, along with his bonus point for taking the pole. Right now, at this point, he is the individual points leader over Scott Pruitt by 1.27 to 26. There you see Al Unser Jr. in 3rd. Christian Fittipaldi also in that picture, but Christian Fittipaldi is actually a lap down in 17th position. Remember, he stalled it after coming across the accident earlier between Tracy and Michael Andretti.
But given the way that Christian's been running, I wouldn't be surprised to see him working his way back up through the field there, and indeed similarly for Andre Riviero. In front of them at the moment, Matsushita and 1 or 2 others shouldn't be too difficult for them to have to deal with.
Back to the Indycar World Series with
Husqvarna Forest and Garden Products.
Mark Blundell disappointed to be just a spectator in Australia. Let's hear from him now.
Had 3 fractures in my foot, not just one, and my lungs and ribs collided, and all the cartilage muscle in the rib cage is stretched out.
Now, we've just had a chance to look at the replay. Have you watched that yourself? Have you now had a chance to see how horrifying that crash was?
I watched it 2 times. I turned off the TV. I don't want to see it anymore.
That was a horrifying crash, and you had high praise for these Indy cars taking that kind of impact.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, I thank the guys at Reynard. What a great car. I mean, I'm lucky to be alive. The 200-mile-an-hour incident, that was a big one.
Now, you're in a cast now. When might we see you back in a race car?
Honestly and realistically, I think maybe Nazareth. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss out the 2 road circuits here and Long Beach.
All right, well, I know ovals may not be the first place to start, but we look forward to seeing you at Nazareth.
Mark Blundell had that huge incident, 200 miles per hour in the wall at Nazareth. We saw at Rio, we saw it replayed there. Poor guy gets to miss the street race where he thought he'd be really good. Now it sounds like he's going to miss Long Beach, which means his next race will be an oval.
Yes, well, as we were saying earlier on, we did gather on the phone from England earlier on this week that the incident had hurt Mark's foot more than he thought it had. There were more bones broken than was originally thought to be the case, not surprising. And he was just telling us there, which is also not surprising when you have a 199 mile an hour to 0 up against a concrete wall impact, that the seat belts really pressed him up against his rib cage, and that he's got all sorts of muscular and tissue damage there. And Mark is going to take a little longer to get back than we thought he would do, but our best wishes with him and to the Pac West team to get out there again as soon as they can. They still have Mauricio Gugelmin running in 5th place.
13 laps remain here at Australia. Jimmy Vasser leads over Scott Pruitt and Greg Moore. Just to round off, we were talking about a Manufacturers' Championship. Honda leads out over Ford quite handily at this point. Firestone, of course, have won both races so far in the Indy Series. So have Honda. Honda have won both races. Reynard have won one. Lola have won one. And in the rookie standings, Alessandro Zanardi leads out over Greg Moore. Well, with this finish, Greg Moore would take over the lead in the rookie championship. And in the Nations Cup, USA is tied with Brazil at the moment with 36 points. But looking good for USA today as far as that championship is concerned. Alonso Jr. blistering his way through the field, Christopher.
Very tight and competitive back here in what we were just calling the Brazilian bunch of Bozell, Gugelmin, De Ferran and Christian Fittipaldi, because there now in the middle of it is Al Jr., as always, timing his run, coming on through there, not necessarily perfecting what he would have wanted to have done with the various incidents that have befallen him today, but nevertheless moving very strong, and we wouldn't be surprised to see him squeezing past the Hollywood Cigarette-sponsored car of Mauricio Gugelmin very shortly indeed.
The Albuquerque, New Mexico resident, Alonso Jr., two-time IndyCar champion, is mixing it up with Gilles de Ferran, Raul Bozell and Mauricio Gugelmin, the Brazilian boys here in Australia. International coverage on ESPN. Guy Hobbs and Christopher Tate bringing you this live coverage. Don't forget, just over 2 weeks from now, we will be in Long Beach after, of course, the Easter break. Wish everybody a happy Easter, and of course, don't forget, Monday morning, Christopher, if you get one of those crank calls, it's April Fool's Day, old boy.
Yes, mustn't forget that.
Actually, it'll probably be me calling you.
April the 1st. Now, interesting to hear Mark Blundell also saying that he's going to miss Long Beach, because that's another circuit we would have expected him to do well. We will also expect Zanardi to do well at Long Beach, and Greg Moore. And Greg Moore is the man of those three, of the three rookies, who is running strongest, of course, because he's still there looking strong in 3rd.
So far, Greg Moore has not been to a track that he's ever driven on before. Long Beach
he knows, and has won in Indy Lights. And I was just wondering whether Jimmy Vasser wasn't getting a little bit slippier at the back there, a little more sliding around, but he's looking very steady. It's been a very mature race from Jimmy.
His mum's here this weekend helping him run this race. Of course, she wouldn't miss a chance to go to Australia. Unfortunately for Jimmy, last time his mum attended a race was in Portland, Oregon, when he was awarded the win.
You'll find that's what his problem was. There are no gears as he came up. You could see the gears weren't slowing him. That was straight on the brakes, and that's evidence of what we were suspecting about the transmission problem. Further, he's not going to be able to get out of there, because I suspect he won't be able to select any reverse gear.
I believe there may be a little bit of a run. No, there is no runoff area there, so you're right. He may be stuck there, which means we may get another. They may be able to whip him around that corner there, but we may get another yellow flag.
With 11 laps to go, a yellow flag now could be very interesting. Once again, Jimmy Vasser, having eked out the lead that he has, is going to find himself perhaps being closed down a little more quickly than he would want by Pruitt and Greg Moore.
We always talk at these races, Christopher, about 20 points being on the line for a win. Of course, on the weekend, there's 22 points on the line. One for the pole, bonus point, one for leading the most laps. Well, Vasser has got both of those points so far this weekend, and is looking like he's on his way to get another 20 points, although Pruitt, who is tied with him in the championship right now, will pick up 16 and keep the championship very, very close. So Vasser, Pruitt, Moore lead it. Bozell is 4th, Gugelmin 5th, Gilles de Ferran 6th, Christian Fittipaldi 7th, Stefan Johansson is 8th. In 9th, it's Eddie Lawson. Rivera was in 10th before that problem. Moreno in 11th, Alonso Jr. in 12th. Jr. trying to pick up a couple of positions. He's battling in with all those Brazilian guys.
And has dropped back dramatically in the last lap or so.
I don't know if he had a problem or in fact if they weren't in fact battling, but the fact that they're a lap ahead of him because of that problem he had with Gilles de Ferran.
That's probably the right way round. Jimmy's still looking very strong, and he is... Let's just see how our leader, and now the championship leader, runs a lap here at the tremendously exciting and close street circuit Surface Paradise.
His teammate had a transmission problem as we ride on board with Jimmy Vasser. Let's see if we can hear any or detect any kind of problems with his transmission. Doesn't sound like. Nicely through the gears into the left-hander. Back on the power very quickly. He seems to be just fine in that car at this point. He wasn't either. We talked about Scott Pruitt, who was short shifting. Certainly not happy with Vasser right now.
And it really makes the point very nicely about the comparison with the lap we just did with Andre Riviere, who certainly was having gearbox trouble that has now led to him having to slide out at the sharp left-hander.
Back through the gears for 30-year-old Jimmy Vasser, looking to get his second Indycar win, his first coming at Miami at the season opener. This could be a great boost to his championship hopes in 1996. There you get a good look of the rundown of the top 5, in fact the top 10 for you, after 55 or 65 laps, just 10 remaining in Australia. Gold Coast of Australia, Surface Paradise in Queensland, site of round 3 of the 1996 PPG IndyCar World Series. It's been a great race here for the last 5 years, and once again in its 6th year proving to be that way, although Vasser and Pruitt pretty much dominated all day long. With 9 laps to go, Scott Pruitt is about 3 seconds behind Jimmy Vasser. Greg Moore is in 3rd, Ralph Bosell is in 4th, and Mauricio Guzman is in 5th position. Guy Hobbs and Christopher Tate with live ESPN coverage for you. A reminder, we'll have more live coverage of the IndyCar Series coming your way in just a couple of weeks from the street course in Long Beach, California. Be sure to catch that, and we would love to see Mark Blundell back in the car for that. It doesn't sound as though he will make it though, and that'll be Nazareth, which will be 2 weeks after Long Beach. And then after that, we make our run on the US 500 and the problems with the IRL and the Indy 500, all that coming to fruition in May of 1996, not far down the road.
The IRL, of course, just ran their second race of the year last weekend at Phoenix, which was won by Ariel Lyondike, a winner at Indianapolis a few years ago, in a mixed quality field.
He also won at Phoenix previously in the IndyCars, and of course he now makes Phoenix his home. So for all the folks over in Europe who are following Ariel Lyondike, he's doing pretty good as far as in Phoenix, and as far as the IRL is concerned. He's not leading the championship, but he's up there high in points right now, along with Buzz Corkins and some of the other guys as they get ready to go to the Indy 500, which will be their last round
Series with
Husqvarna Forest and Garden Products.
Here we are on board with our leader, Jimmy Vasser. And Jimmy has run a steady race. He's now just got to take it carefully. Well, when I say steady race, he's run a very impressive race.
Very impressive. No mistakes, no errors. Been a lot of incidents around him, been a lot of traffic, and he has found his way through it nicely, and he's had the fastest lap. He said it twice, and in fact, the last time he said it was back on lap 25, and he's led pretty much the entire way, picked up some bonus points. Great run for the 30-year-old Jimmy Vasser.
And we went into this race with Pruitt and Vasser at the top of the championship table. It looks very much as though we're going to go on and back to the United States, back to Long Beach in 2 weeks' time, with those two very much at the top of the table, barring any problems. Now, the person, of course, who's made the greatest improvement over the weekend, if you like, having 19th place at the end of first practice, moved up to a final qualification of 8th place, Greg Moore. Greg Moore is now running third. Vasser and Pruitt, having qualified on the front row, pretty much kept where they wanted to be over the course of the weekend. Greg Moore's improvement very noticeable, as is also Raoul Bozel's, who's moved up from 15th.
Now, here's an interesting scenario. In America, the legal drinking age is 21. Greg Moore's going to make the podium today. In Australia, I'm not sure what their drinking age is down there, but he will be allowed to...
About 10, isn't it?
You're right, in Australia it is.
I don't think anyone's too worried about the little tinnies they get to drink there, and I'd be very surprised if anyone officiously tries to stop that young man tasting the champagne.
He will be able to neck a tube of Foster's after this race in Australia. If he were finished on the podium here in America, of course, he would not be allowed to sip the champagne that is handed out at the end of the event.
Curious what it is you could be old enough to do on one hand and not on the other, isn't it?
He can drive at 200 miles per hour and collect a ton of money and some great points in the championship.
Well, you're not allowed to drink champagne. Well, Craig, that's not going to be your problem for very much longer.
Vasser, Pruitt, Moore, Bozel, Guzman are the top five. De Ferran, Fittipaldi, Johansson, Eddie Lawson and Andre Ribeiro continue to be the top 10. Alonso Jr. now up to 11th position. Let's just run down through the Matsushita and Moreno. Then out of the race, Carlos Guerrero, Robbie Gordon. We don't know what happened. We don't have a report from the Gordon pit what happened to him, but disappointed, no points this weekend. Brian Herger is out. Juan Manuel Fangio is out after making contact. Jeff Krosnoff is out after hitting the wall. Michael Andretti went out with some kind of computer and electrical problems. Bobby Rahal went out, we're not sure why. Also, Fernandez is out, along with Paul Tracy, Parker Johnston, Alessandro Zanardi, and Krosnoff. So those guys are all out of this event. The ones that are in it, Vasser, Pruitt, and Moore, 1, 2, and 3, with 6 laps remaining. They should be able to get this race in underneath the 2-hour time limit that they are designated in Indycar.
Yes, we're on 59 out of 65 laps, and there are about 8 minutes yet left to run, so it should be possible to do it. I think the thing we must just note here is that this group here, the boys from Brazil, as we were calling them earlier on, Bozel, followed by Guzman, followed by De Ferran, followed by Christian Fittipaldi, are at it hammer and tongs here, and indeed in their efforts are spurring Raoul Bozel on to close in a little bit on Greg Moore, though I think it unlikely that Bozel is going to find a way past Moore, who's very determined to make his podium position he's looking for here. But a good run guy under pressure from Raoul Bozel. We were saying when we were covering the Brazil race that Raoul really, with all this money and with such a strong team, this is the year he must get results. The 87 World Sports Car Champion, runner in Indycars for many, many years now, and of course formerly in Formula One with the Ligier and before that the March team. But now here we go, he's up there in 4th place. He's carrying number 1, which of course he inherited by moving into the team that Jacques Villeneuve had taken to the championship in 95. But he's running a much stronger race than perhaps we suspected, and he's holding off Guzman and De Ferran. Guzman has just nipped by De Ferran there, and it's been a little tight there all the time. Christian Fittipaldi playing a watching brief back at the back of that 4 of the boys from Brazil.
A good battle going on between the, as you say, boys from Brazil, the boys from the USA lead it right now. Vasser and Pruitt, then Canadian Greg Moore in 3rd, then the boys from Brazil, Bozel, Guzman, De Ferran, Christian Fittipaldi, and then the Swede, Stefan Johansson, then the American, Eddie Lawson, then the Brazilian, Andre Ribeiro, making up this huge international field on a very international series. We talk about the hours, they'll let it run its full 65 laps.
And it's nice to see those
5 laps remaining here, and once again Vassar's still with the fastest time and the fastest lap, and he's picked up the bonus points for the pole, and he picked up the points also for leading the most laps. Guzman, as you mentioned, got past Gilles de Ferran, and I believe he's also managed to make it past Raul.
Yes, we think that around the back of the circuit there he has managed to get past Raul Boesel, and there are some tense faces here in the
Alspire and the Firestone team in the Patrick pit. Maybe problems with Pruitt. Maybe problems for Pruitt. Last minute transmission, maybe tyres. You saw the Firestone guys all get together there. Only 5 laps remaining. Boesel has just dropped off the leaderboard, and he's gone back to 8th position. He may well be out of this race. Maybe terminal problems. So Christopher, the kiss of death.
I'm afraid that clearly was almost the Murray Walker treatment there, I'm afraid, Guy. We just had a complimentary remark or two to make about Raul Boesel, and immediately he drops from 4th to 9th and falling off the leaderboard. Yes, he's a lap behind, and I'm afraid that's that. That promotes Mauricio Kugelmin up to 4th. Some reward for the Pac West team after all their disappointments and unpleasantness in Rio.
Puts Lawson up to 8th. Here's Boesel on the left of Vassar right now. Vassar goes by.
Yep, so that's definitely
trying to work his way back to the pit area. Here is Vassar.
Well, it may all have been getting a little bit marginal on the fuel for Boesel's team there. Apparently he's radioed to the pits and said it's a pickup problem. And again, there must be something that somebody knows here, that guy that's showing us these worried looks in the Pat Patrick trip.
Maybe trouble for Scott Pruitt. We'll see if we can hear anything. Ooh, some rumblings from his car. Don't forget, of course, Gilles de Ferran, fellow Brazilian, ran out of fuel in Rio 2 weeks ago while leading. Boesel looking for his best result of the year here in Australia.
And there's another Brazilian slowing there on the inside. That was Roberto Moreno, who's also just slipped away, had been lying 10th, now back to 13th, and falling away there, obviously with some sort of mechanical problem as well.
I just tried to figure out all the points for the championship, and of course Christopher has got it all marked down, and suddenly everybody's disappearing off the leaderboard.
It always happens that way.
Except for our leader, Jimmy Vassar, 12 seconds ahead of Scott Pruitt. Pruitt was 3 seconds behind. He has obviously turned the wick down a lot, backed off, and trying to nurse that car to the finish here. But Greg Moore also obviously having to do the same thing, because he has not been threatening Pruitt for that 2nd position. Although now Moore starting to make up some ground on Scott Pruitt. Moore had dropped back quite a bit. So Greg Moore, the Canadian, looking definitely for a podium finish, but can he get a 2nd place finish? 62 laps in the book for working lap 63. Here we see Guzman and Gilles de Ferran racing. Boesel has gone from this lineup at this point. Christian Fittipaldi behind them in 6th position.
And Christian dropping back just a little bit there, Guy. And interesting to see, Greg Moore is really going to be up there giving Pruitt a hard time. This race has really had everything. Constant incident, and despite the fact that Vassar and Pruitt have been dominant, undoubtedly dominant, and a very good result for them throughout, nevertheless, there's been a lot of activity all the way down through the field. Such a competitive series. Practice times, again, very, very close, and really a great deal of action throughout this race. Gilles de Ferran hoping that he can get back up there. He wouldn't mind the extra points, but Guzman may yet get the 4th place for Pac.
They're now working lap 64. Jimmy Vassar leading in his Target Ganassi Firestone Reynard Honda car. The American driver over fellow American Scott Pruitt in a Lola Ford Cosworth Firestone car. But maybe some problem for him, although he's still keeping that gap between himself and Moore at about 2 seconds. Greg Moore definitely trying to get his first podium finish, but will it be in a 2nd position or 3rd position? Guzman in 4th, De Ferran in 5th, Christian Fittipaldi 6th, Stephanie Johansson 7th, Eddie Lawson in 8th, Andre Ribeiro in 9th, and Alonso Jr. worked his way up to 10th position.
Still a very strong run from Eddie Lawson there. The ex-motorcyclist had been up as high as 5th, but with the reshuffles that have happened in the last few laps, he's found himself falling back behind the group of Brazilian drivers who moved in front of him there. And 8th will be a very satisfactory result for him. Yep, Alonso Jr., never say die. The Penske team, as always, there. And he'll welcome those points from the top 10 finish. 11.5 seconds Vassar's now got over Pruitt, and he doesn't seem to be under any threat at all. Now, the only question is Greg Moore going to be able to close Pruitt down and actually do something about it before the end of the race, which is just about a lap and a half away for those
Still a good battle going on between Gilles de Ferran and Mauricio Guzman, although we now hear a report from around the track that de Ferran has gone out after 3 contacts and surviving and working his way back up through the field. De Ferran may be out. Quite a flag gap for Jimmy Vasser.
And I hope for everybody's sake back there in the hall pit that de Ferran's problem is not fuel shortage, guy, after the incident at Rio. Gilles will otherwise be a very unhappy young man.
Yeah, Gilles de Ferran, who is currently in 5th position in the points with 19, really should be up front with about 25, 26 points after a great run at Rio, and it could have picked up a bunch of points here and almost won at Miami. So a tough day for Gilles de Ferran if it is true and he is out. We do see him going down the leaderboard, so yes, de Ferran has problems. Lawson will pick up 7th place position. Everybody bumps up one now, so it's Guzman, Fittipaldi, Johansson, then de Ferran at this point, but he is about to be overtaken by Eddie Lawson. As Vasser is going to come around to complete lap number 65 and take his 2nd IndyCar victory in only 59 starts. His 4th full season in the IndyCars. He raced a couple in 1995, raced with Jim Hayhoe, got put on to the Ganassi team by Jim Hayhoe pushing him and telling Ganassi to make sure you take Jimmy Vasser because he's a great driver. Ganassi wasn't a big believer, tested him, put him in the car, kept him from last year, and now Jimmy Vasser is going to reward the Minneapolis, actually Pittsburgh native.
Getting a big wave from the crowd there, and the first man since Nigel Mansell at this race to win from pole.
Excellent point, and pick up maximum points, 22 points for Vasser as he wins his 2nd IndyCar race, and coming in 10 seconds behind him. There you see the Target Ganassi crew. That's Chip Ganassi in the white shirt, celebrating. Alessandro Zanardi, part of that team now, had a great run before his gearbox gave him troubles at the end. But a very, very happy Target Ganassi team.
Back to the IndyCar World Series with
Husqvarna Forest and Garden Products.
Surfers Paradise winner and new IndyCar Championship leader Jimmy Vasser. There he is. Let's join our colleagues over in Australia.
The Grand Prix of Long Beach. Will we see him repeat there? Jimmy Vasser, for now, owns Australia. It was well worth the trip for this San Francisco native to go to Australia and pick up the maximum
really,
22
without
points.
any concrete
His club
results.
was there. Jack Root, ABC is there, and hopefully
thought if
we're going to get a quick word
to do
with Jimmy Vasser before we disappear. But make sure you join us once again in 2 weeks from
pole to
Long
finish.
Beach.
What a race.
It was great. I got to say, this is the best race car I've ever had. It just did everything perfect. We had to make a change for engine cooling right before the start, and we were a little worried about it, but I got to hand it to my whole Target Ganassi crew. They made the right call. It was just the most beautiful race car. I wanted to keep going. It was so nice to drive. It was just great. I owe it all to the team.
Were there any problems with the car at all? We thought there may have been some sort of transmission or gearbox problem.
It started getting a little sticky, but it didn't get any worse, and I got a little bit of a lead there, so I started just trying to make sure I take care of the automobile.
All right, your first trip to not your first trip to the Gold Coast, but the first win here. 4 trips, taken 5 years for it.
Feels great. It's a beautiful place down here. I just hope we can keep coming in the future.
All right, Jimmy Vasser wants to keep coming. As you saw, he wanted to keep racing at the end of the race.
When we saw him, what you just called as his slowing down, your cooling down lap. In fact, he was doing anything but. He was bouncing off the curbs, waving his hands in the air. He was having a great time. Good result.
In the points, Vasser leads with 47. Pruitt is second with 42. And then it's a step back to Al Unser Jr. with 25 points, who is tied with Andre Ribeiro. And then de Ferran with 21. And then a whole slew of guys, Rahal, Gordon, Zanardi, and Fittipaldi, all around the 18 to 14 mark. It's been a great race. Christopher Tate, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure. What an enjoyable race. It always is at Surfers.
All right, and we'll see you live from Long Beach in a couple of weeks. For everybody at ESPN, this is Guy Hobbs saying so long and see you at Long Beach.
IndyCar World Series was brought to you by
Husqvarna Forest and Garden Products. Bridgestone, the science of performance. And Valvoline Motor Oil.